Hello, my name is Christo Wilson, and I'm an associate professor in the Corey College of Computer Sciences at Northeastern University. In this video, I'm going to tell you about our recent study entitled Setting the Bar Low, Are Websites Complying with the Minimum Requirements of the CCPA? This was joint work with former Northeastern undergrad Maggie van Nortwick, and this work was funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. As of 2022, the United States does not have a comprehensive federal-level online privacy law. This is why the California Consumer Privacy Act, or the CCPA, is so important. As the U.S.'s most populous state, California has an outsized role in setting national policy. Thus, the CCPA is currently the most important online privacy law in the U.S. At a high level, the CCPA does two things. It requires that websites and apps notify people about data collection, and it creates a number of rights for data subjects, including the ability to opt out of data collection, as well as access, modify, and delete collected data. The CCPA went into effect in January 2020, so websites available to Californians should be honoring its terms. Furthermore, as of July 2022, 4 U.S. states have passed laws that are similar to the CCPA, and 6 more states have similar laws under active consideration. So across the U.S., the CCPA's influence is already being felt. Lastly, I will note that as of this moment, the CCPA is in the process of being superseded by an even newer law, the California Privacy Rights Act, or CPRA, which is, for the most part, even stricter about online privacy than the CCPA. Rulemaking for the CPRA is underway right now, and the law is slated to go into effect in January 2023. Given that the CCPA is currently in effect, we wondered whether websites are complying with its provisions. This question was motivated in part by many excellent studies that have looked at compliance with Europe's GDPR and found that compliance was very much lacking. We wondered whether California could be facing similar problems, especially because, as of July 2022, regulatory enforcement of the CCPA has not yet begun in earnest. This issue of enforcement is critical because the CCPA and the CPRA do not include rights of private action. It is up to regulators in California to enforce these laws. Thus, understanding whether the CCPA is being complied with in the wild is critical, because if it's not, measurement is the first step towards triggering enforcement actions. Finally, I've already mentioned how other U.S. states are passing laws that emulate the CCPA, and California itself is drafting new rules around the CPRA. If it turns out that the CCPA is not being complied with, these insights may be useful for other states that are currently still drafting online privacy laws, and for California regulators. Now, the CCPA is a complex law with many components. Rather than trying to measure compliance with them all, we decided to measure compliance with what we thought would be the simplest and most obvious facet of the law. This little link right here, the Do Not Sell My Personal Information link. We call this the DNS MPI link for short. The CCPA requires that websites that are covered by the law include a link on their homepage. This link must say, Do not sell my personal information, or a limited number of alternate phrasings, and clicking the link must bring the user to a web page where they can learn about and exercise their rights under the CCPA. In other words, the DNS MPI link is supposed to be an easily recognizable, one-stop shop for Californians to opt out of data collection and activate their data subject rights. Given that the DNS MPI link is simple for websites to adopt and relatively straightforward for us to crawl on the web, we decided to make it the focus of our study. We treat the DNS MPI link as a bellwether for broader compliance with the CCPA. If a website doesn't have a DNS MPI link, we believe it's unlikely that they are in compliance with the more complex aspects of the CCPA, like data collection opt-outs or data access requests. So far, so simple. Crawl websites and identify one hyperlink. Easy study. Well, it turns out that things are not that simple. The issue is that the CCPA has complex eligibility criteria. It only applies to websites owned by private parties that meet one of the following criteria. They must have annual gross revenue of at least $25 million. They must sell the personal information of at least 50,000 unique Californians, or they need to derive at least 50% of their annual revenue from the sale of Californians' personal information. I'll note that the CPRA raises the second criteria from 50,000 to 100,000 unique Californians. These eligibility criteria make studying CCPA compliance very challenging. If a given website doesn't have a DNS MPI link, is that because it's violating the law, or because the law simply does not apply to it? This brings me to the goals and contributions of our study. Ours is the first study to study CCPA compliance among websites. We focus on the DNS MPI link as the bellwether for compliance, and we use market intelligence data that we purchased to try and distinguish lack of compliance with the law from ineligibility under the law. As I will discuss, we also use the presence of embedded ad tech on web pages as a leading indicator of which websites are potentially engaged in the sale of data and thus implicated under the law. We conducted 3 crawls, which lets us examine changes in compliance with the law over time, including adoption and removal of DNS MPI links and updates to DNS MPI link text. We investigate the use of geofences that dynamically show DNS MPI links just to Californians. This practice is legal under the CCPA, but raises problems that we discuss in the paper. Lastly, we investigate whether DNS MPI links are displayed in a clear and conspicuous manner, as required under the law. Now, this is a short video, so I won't have time to cover all of our results. If you're interested, I urge you to read the paper. Let's briefly discuss our data gathering approach. We started with a frontier for our crawler composed of roughly 1 million domains drawn from the Tranco top list and a list of well-known ad tech companies. Our crawler was able to capture non-empty home pages for 733,000 of these domains. After applying an English language filter, we are left with roughly 500,000 home pages. Of these, only 10,000 included a DNS MPI link, versus 220,000 that included a link to a privacy policy. Also for context, 738,000 of these websites did embed ad tech. We repeated our crawl 3 times, in summer 2020, late fall 2020, and spring 2021. At this point, we have a lot of data about which websites adopted DNS MPI links, but we have no idea which websites are actually covered by the CCPA. To address this problem, we bought data from a marketing analytics company called SEMrush. SEMrush sold us estimates of the unique number of visitors for 203,000 of the websites in our corpus. Recall that unique visitors from California is the second eligibility criteria for the CCPA. The data from SEMrush was for all US visitors, so we scaled the numbers down proportionate to California's online population. These are the numbers we use to estimate which websites may be covered by the CCPA. So let's go back to our original question. Are websites adopting DNS MPI links? This scatter plot shows the 203,000 websites in our corpus for which we had estimates of unique visitors. We organized these websites by popularity along the x-axis and unique visitors from California on the y-axis. The vast majority of websites are gray dots, which means they did not have a DNS MPI link on their homepage. Blue dots are websites that did have a DNS MPI link. Let's start by looking at all the websites in the lower half of the figure. These websites all fall below the CPRA eligibility criteria of 100,000 unique visitors from California, meaning it's likely the CPRA and, for the most part, the CCPA do not apply to these websites. 95% of the websites in our sample fall into this category. This helps explain why DNS MPI link adoption is so low overall on the web. The CCPA simply does not apply to most websites. However, 81% of all the websites in our sample that do include a DNS MPI link are in this lower half of the figure, which suggests that many websites are adopting the DNS MPI link even though they may not be legally required to do so. Now let's focus our attention on the top left corner of the figure. There are 10,000 websites in this area that are above the CCPA's eligibility criteria of 50,000 unique visitors, yet only 18% of them have adopted DNS MPI links. If we restrict ourselves even further, there are 5,000 websites that are above the CPRA's eligibility criteria of 100,000 unique visitors, yet only 23% of them have adopted the DNS MPI link. These results are troubling. They suggest that the vast majority of websites that the CCPA is meant to apply to have not started complying with the law. Now you may be thinking, hold on, maybe these websites don't have the DNS MPI link because they aren't selling personal information. Well, 97% of the websites in this region include embedded ad tech. So yes, these websites are potentially involved in the data business, so it's likely they are implicated by the CCPA. The CCPA states that DNS MPI links must be clear and conspicuous, but it does not define what that means. Here, we've taken the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative's guidelines as our criteria for assessing conspicuousness. This CDF shows the contrast ratio of DNS MPI, terms of service, and privacy policy links on the websites in our sample. The WA guidelines specify 2 levels of accessibility, with AA being okay contrast ratio and AAA being very clear contrast. We see that 40% of websites in our sample fail to meet the AA criteria, 5 to 10% meet the AA criteria, and over 50% do meet the AAA criteria, with a spike in the end corresponding to websites that have high contrast black on white text. These results suggest that roughly half of the websites in our sample are not in compliance, or could at least improve their compliance, with the display requirements of the CCPA. What about where DNS MPI links are shown? This heat map aggregates the locations of the DNS MPI links on the home pages we crawled, scaled to a standard 1080p aspect ratio. Note that this figure is log scaled, and the vast majority of the heat is along the bottom edge. This is unsurprising and matches our findings for privacy policy in terms of service link locations. Websites overwhelmingly put these links at the bottom of the homepage. Whether this counts as clear and conspicuous is unclear. On the one hand, this design pattern is so common, maybe people expect to find this information at the bottom of web pages. On the other hand, we know that people rarely scroll to the very bottom of web pages, so this seems like a non-ideal place to put legally required and critical privacy information. If you are curious, there is much more interesting analysis in our paper. We find a small but significant number of websites using geofences to restrict access to DNS MPI links. We find that over time, compliance with the DNS MPI link requirement is barely growing at all. We also find that over time, websites are not adjusting their DNS MPI links to reflect changes in the law. This, unfortunately, does not bode well for the rollout of the CPRA in January 2023. If we accept that DNS MPI links are a reasonable proxy for compliance with the CCPA, then we find that overall compliance with the law is low, even accounting for the law's complex eligibility requirements. That said, one of our primary findings is that measuring CCPA and CPRA compliance is very challenging, given these complex eligibility criteria. Finally, it is clear that much more study is needed here. We did not investigate other aspects of CCPA compliance, like honoring opt-out requests or data access requests. Plus, online privacy laws in the US are changing rapidly, so understanding whether they are working is critical. If I have one ask for regulators, it's to please include more uniform disclosure requirements in future online privacy laws. If we can't tell who the law is meant to apply to, we can't actually help you assess compliance. Thanks, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please feel free to read the paper and reach out to me with questions.